My beloved, listen closely. For too long, you've been taught to scatter your strength, to dim your light in the name of politeness, to serve every demand and expectation, until you forgot the sound of your own heartbeat. You've been told that self-focus is selfish, that putting yourself first is arrogance. But I say to you, it is your divine responsibility to come home to yourself. Let me tell you a secret: the world does not benefit from your exhaustion. It does not thrive because you've abandoned your dreams to support someone else's comfort. There is a quiet revolution rising, revolution of those who remember who they are, who reclaim their time, their energy, their voice. And when you do this, when you do, the world will tremble, because a focused soul cannot be controlled. Do you see now why they never taught you to love yourself fully? This message was never about love. What if it was about control? Because a person who is disconnected from themselves is much easier to shape, to manipulate, and to keep small. When you focus on yourself, you begin to ask difficult questions, questions that disrupt the status quo. Who am I truly? What do I want outside of what I've been told to want? What brings me peace, joy, purpose? These questions are not encouraged in a society built on conformity, but they are essential, and the answers don't come from outside. They come only from within, through time, space, and the radical act of self-attention. Focusing on yourself means honoring your energy, your thoughts, your needs. It means turning inward when the world demands outward performance. It means saying no when you've been trained to say yes. It is the act of stopping long enough to listen to the subtle voice that has been drowned out by obligations, expectations, and noise. And make no mistake, there is a voice in you that knows exactly what you need. It has always been there. The question is, have you made space to hear it? This kind of self-focus is not passive. It is not scrolling for hours or endlessly numbing yourself from paying as active. It is presence. It is discipline. It requires courage, because it asks you to step away from distraction and into honesty. It demands that you feel what you've avoided, confront what you've buried, and release what is not yours to carry. That is not selfish. That is sacred. There is a lie that says you must earn your worth through sacrifice, but you were born worthy. You don't have to bleed to prove your value. When you center yourself, not in arrogance but in clarity, you become anchored, rooted, and that is when you start to show up with truth. You begin to give from a place of overflow, not depletion. Your yes becomes powerful because it's real. Your no becomes a boundary, not a betrayal. People may not understand this version of you at first. You may lose some approval, but what you gain is beyond comparison. You gain self-trust. You gain alignment. You gain yourself. And when you stand in the fullness of who you are, when your choices come from a place of inner knowing rather than outer pressure, your life begins to change. It stops being a reaction and becomes a creation. To focus on yourself is to say, I matter. My life is not a rehearsal for someone else's comfort. It's not an abandonment of love. It's the foundation of real love. Because only when you are connected to yourself can you connect to others without attachment, without resentment, losing your center. You stop seeking validation and start living in integrity. This kind of clarity is rare. And yes, it can be lonely at first, because the word is loud and stillness is often misunderstood. But in that stillness, something holy begins to happen. You begin to remember. You begin to rebuild. You begin to rise. A focused soul cannot be controlled. This is not just a poetic idea. It is a spiritual reality, a truth that sends streamers through every system built on distraction, confusion, and dependency. Because when a person becomes focused, truly focused on who they are, what they carry, and what they were sent here to do, they become unshakable. The noise of the world loses its grip. The manipulation of others no longer works. You no longer dance for approval or shrink for safety. You move from a place of knowing, and that kind of movement is unstoppable. To be focused is to be clear. And clarity is power. Most people are not walking through life with clarity. They are walking in circles, lost in the fog of opinions, expectations, unresolved wounds, and inherited fear. Focus cuts through all of that. It is the light in the cave, the flame in the dark. It says, I know who I am. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm not here for. This level of inner precision is threatening to anyone who benefits from your confusion. Because when you are unclear, you are easy to lead away from yourself. But when your vision sharpens, control slips through their hands like dust. This is why distractions are so aggressively marketed to us. Not just through media or devices, but through drama, through false urgency, through constant comparison. If they can keep you looking outward, you'll never realize what you already carry within. But the moment you return to your center, when you say, no more noise, I choose to see, everything begins to shift. You start noticing what used to blend in. You start hearing what used to be drowned out. You no longer move just to survive. You move with intention. Focus is not the absence of chaos. It is the ability to stay connected to your truth in the midst of it. And when you master that, no one can pull you into confusion again. You stop being reactionary. You stop giving your time and energy to every tug, every plea, every guilt trip. You begin to discern what deserves your attention and what is just a test of your growth. That is what makes a focused soul so powerful. It cannot be baited. It cannot be dragged into what does not align. Control requires your disempowerment. It requires you to doubt yourself, to second guess, to believe that you need permission to choose your own life. But when you become focused, permission becomes irrelevant. You move because it's right, not because it's approved. You stop explaining yourself. You stop negotiating with what drains you. Your no becomes enough. Your silence becomes an answer. That kind of authority comes from focus, not force. Focus also brings peace, not the kind of peace that comes from comfort, but the kind that comes from conviction. You don't need everyone to agree with you when you're aligned. You don't need to convince anyone when you've already committed. You become your own compass, and because of that, people can no longer use your uncertainty against you. The traps that once caught you, guilt, fear, obligation, they no longer work, not because they stopped showing up, but because you stopped bowing to them. There is a reason why people who stand in their truth often walk alone, not because they are unloved, but because their clarity unsettles those who are still hiding. Your focus becomes a mirror. It forces others to look at their own lack of direction, their own avoidance, and many will project, accuse, or even try to distract you again, not out of malice but because your freedom reveals their chains. But you are not here to be small so others feel safe. You are not here to carry confusion so others feel in control. The world fears those who know their worth. It's not always spoken, but it's deeply felt. You can see it in the way confident people are called arrogant, in how assertiveness is labeled as difficult, in how self-assuredness is often met with discomfort, suspicion, or envy. There is something unsettling about a person who walks into a room not asking for permission to belong, but simply belonging. And that is what happens when you know your worthing. You stop seeking outside confirmation for something that was already inside of you. Knowing your worth is not about pride, and it is certainly not about superiority. It is about remembrance. It is about the quiet, unwavering understanding that you do not have to earn the right to take up space, to speak, to choose, to dream. When you know your worth, you don't chase. Opportunities come to meet you at your level. You don't beg. What aligns with your value finds its way to you. And because of that, you become very difficult to manipulate. That's what unnerves people who benefit from your doubt. When you are unsure of your value, you are easy to shape. You tolerate mistreatment. You explain yourself repeatedly. You silence your ideas, second-guess your instincts, and shrink to fit into places that are too small for you. But when you remember who you are, when your self-worth becomes your foundation, you walk away from anything that demands your self-abandonment. That is not rebellion, that is clarity. And clarity disrupts systems built on insecurity. Society has been built to keep people reaching, proving, competing. Because as long as you believe you are not enough, you can be sold something to make you feel like you are. But a person who knows their worth can no longer be sold illusions. They stop performing, they stop conforming. They begin to create, they begin to lead. And that shift is threatening, not because it's wrong, but because it cannot be controlled. When you know your worth, you stop entertaining what insults your spirit. You no longer argue with people who misunderstand you. You no longer bend for the sake of approval. Your energy becomes precious. Your time becomes sacred, and people will notice. Some with admiration, some with resistance, because your self-worth forces others to look at their own. And not everyone is ready to do that. Some will try to dim your light so they don't have to confront their own shadows. But knowing your worth is not about who accepts it. It's about whether you do. It's about holding your high in rooms that once intimidated you. It's about trusting yourself even when others don't. It's about staying rooted in your truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you something. Because when you value yourself, you are no longer for sale. Your choices come from vision, not validation. A person who knows their worth becomes magnetic, not because they are perfect, but because they are real. Their presence says, I am not here to compete, I am here to align. And that presence cannot be faked. It cannot be taught in a seminar. It comes from deep work, inner work. The kind that strips away false identities, heals old wounds, and replaces fear with self-respect. That is the kind of worth that cannot be shaken. There will always be those who try to convince you to doubt yourself. Not because you are lacking, but because your confidence challenges their conditioning. But you were not born to live beneath yourself. You were not born to apologize for your presence, your voice, or your power. Your exhaustion does not serve anyone. It's one of the most harmful illusions that if you just give a little more, sacrifice a little harder, stretch yourself a little thinner, somehow you'll finally become enough. You'll finally be seen, finally be loved, finally feel at peace. But the truth is, giving from an empty place doesn't build anything lasting. It breaks you, and a broken version of you, no matter how devoted or well-meaning, is not what the world actually needs. Somewhere along the way, many of us were taught to equate self-worth with self-sacrifice. We learned that being tired meant we were valuable, that being burned out meant we were loyal, that if we were always available, always saying yes, always pushing past our limits, then we were somehow good, kind, worthy of love and acceptance. But that kind of living is a slow erosion of the soul. It's not virtuous. It's not noble. It's dangerous. The people who depend on your overgiving often aren't asking for your health or happiness. They're just used to your compliance. And the more you give beyond what you truly have, the more you teach others to expect it. It becomes normal. It becomes invisible. Until one day you realize that everyone around you is being fed by a version of you that's starving. That kind of service is not sustainable. It doesn't build strong families. It doesn't build strong teams. And it certainly doesn't build strong individuals. When you are exhausted, your vision becomes cloudy. Your intuition gets quiet. Your joy starts to vanish little by little. You can't hear yourself clearly anymore. You stop dreaming. You stop creating. You become mechanical, just surviving. And that version of you, the one constantly depleted and distracted, is not your highest self. It's a shadow, a mask, a placeholder. And the longer you stay in that state, the further away you drift from your purpose. Rest is not a reward. Boundaries are not selfish. Replenishment is not optional. These are not luxuries. They are your foundation. You cannot pour wisdom, clarity, peace, or power into anything if your spirit is dry. You can't give what you don't have. And it's not your job to keep sacrificing so others don't have to face their own discomfort. Your exhaustion is not a shield that protects anyone. It just slowly erases you from your own life. You are not made to be a martyr to other people's expectations. You were not made to carry more than you were meant to hold. There is strength in knowing when to pause. There is wisdom in saying, "This is too much." There is courage in walking away from roles that were never yours to begin with. You don't have to prove anything by overextending yourself. Real love does not ask you to die slowly in the name of duty. The version of you the world needs is the one who is rested enough to think clearly, the one who is emotionally nourished enough to love deeply, the one who has the space to grow, to change, to show up fully. Not of obligation, but out of authenticity. That kind of presence is powerful. That kind of presence heals others just by existing. So many people wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, but what it really reveals is a system out of balance, a lack of boundaries, a fear of slowing down. But stillness is not weakness. Choosing yourself is not betrayal. Protecting your energy is not abandonment of others. It is the beginning of showing up in a way that is honest, sustainable, and whole. Healing requires boundaries, not permission. Healing is not about asking the world to approve of your pain or to validate your process. It is about recognizing what you need, honoring what you feel, and choosing yourself, even when no one else understands it. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are gates that protect what is sacred within you. Without them, healing is almost impossible, because without boundaries, your energy continues to leak into places that harm you, and your progress gets undone by the very people or patterns you're trying to rise above. So many people want to heal while remaining accessible to everything that broke them. They want peace but continue to engage with chaos. They want clarity but won't say no to confusion. They want to move forward but still answer when the past calls. And this is why boundaries are not optional. They are the structure that holds your healing. They are the container that allows transformation to take root and flourish. Without them, you will keep circling the same lessons, exhausting yourself in the name of being nice, or available, or loyal. You don't need permission to protect your peace. You don't need a consensus to rest. You don't need everyone to understand why you're stepping back, why you're saying no, why you're no longer willing to engage in certain conversations or dynamics. Healing will make you less convenient to people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. And that discomfort, that pushback, is part of the process. It's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's often confirmation that you're finally doing something right. Setting boundaries is not about anger, though it may arise. It's not about revenge, though the temptation might surface. It's about clarity. It's about saying, "This is what I need to be whole. This is what I will no longer accept. This is how I must be treated in order to remain in connection. And if someone cannot or will not meet you there, Your healing journey gives you the strength to walk away, not with bitterness, but with peace, not with shame, but with self-respect. Healing is not just about tending to emotional wounds, it's about changing the conditions that caused them. And that means being honest about what you can no longer allow. Some conversations cannot continue. Some relationships cannot stay in the same form. Some environments must be left behind, no matter how familiar. Because healing isn't just internal, it's also environmental. You cannot thrive in the same soil that once poisoned you. And the boundary is what uproots you and allows you to be replanted somewhere better. There will be people who accuse you of being cold, distant, or selfish once you begin to enforce boundaries. But you cannot carry other people's discomfort at the expense of your growth. You are not responsible for managing other people's reactions to your truth. You are responsible for honoring that truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you approval or closeness or tradition. The path to healing is often lonely at first because it requires shedding what is familiar in favor of what is healthy. Boundaries don't mean you love people less. They mean you are learning to love yourself enough to stop allowing harm. They mean you are creating the space necessary to become who you are always meant to be. Real healing creates a deeper capacity for love, joy, presence, and creativity, but only when it's guarded by the kind of boundaries that make that growth possible. You are not cold for choosing peace. You are not hard for choosing yourself. You are finally seeing that you never needed to ask for permission to be whole. Let go of roles that dim your light. There are parts you were taught to play. Quiet, agreeable, reliable, always available, always accommodating. They were handed to you like costumes, stitched together by tradition, expectation, fear, and guilt. And somewhere along the way, you started wearing them like skin, believing that being good meant being small, that being loved meant being less, that being accepted meant being invisible. But you were never born to be a character in someone else's script. You were born to live fully, boldly, as your whole self. Not the edited version that keeps everyone else comfortable. So many people live entire lives trapped inside roles that were never theirs. The role of the peacekeeper who swallows truth to keep harmony. The role of the caretaker who gives endlessly and receives nothing. The role of the achiever who performs for applause but is starving for rest. These roles become identities, and soon it becomes hard to separate who you are from who you've been pretending to be. But when you begin to wake up to this truth, when your soul begins to stir and whisper that there is more, you cannot unknow it. You begin to feel the tension between you are and who you've been taught to be. Letting go of these roles is terrifying, because they've brought you belonging, even if it was conditional. They've earned you praise, even if it cost you your peace. They've made you feel safe, even if you had to abandon parts of yourself to maintain them. But safety at the cost of self is not safety. It's quiet suffocation. And no role, no expectation, no false peace is worth your light. Because every time you dim yourself to fit a mold, you betray your own becoming. The truth is, some of these roles were never requested. They were assumed. You picked them up as a child, trying to make sense of chaos or secure love or avoid punishment. You learned to read the room, shrink your voice, carry burdens that weren't yours. You became adaptable, responsible, pleasing, obedient. And maybe those patterns once protected you. Maybe they kept you alive. But now they're keeping you small. And the moment you recognize that, you are invited into freedom. Freedom begins when you decide that authenticity matters more than approval. When you say, I am not here to fulfill anyone else's version of me. That's when healing deepens. Creativity returns, clarity awakens. And yes, letting go of those roles might mean disappointing people who only loved the version of you that served them. But you cannot live your life performing for an audience that doesn't know your soul. You cannot keep twisting yourself into shapes that hurt just to be seen. Your light is not meant to be dimmed for comfort. It's meant to be expanded for impact. When you release these roles, you don't become less. You become more. More alive, more honest, more aligned. You begin to live in your truth, even if your voice shakes. You begin to say no, not from rebellion, but from reverence. You begin to move in ways that reflect your values, not your fears. This is not selfishness. This is reclamation. Reclaiming the pieces of you that were buried beneath duty, politeness, and pressure. Reclaiming your right to evolve, to change your mind, to no longer be who others expect. And yes, the shedding will hurt. There will be grief in saying goodbye to the roles that once defined you. But there will also be space. Space to breathe, to expand, to step into the fullness of your purpose without apology. You are not here to dim down so the room feels balanced. You are here to shine. When you begin to focus on yourself, people will call it selfish, not because it is, but because they no longer benefit from your self-neglect. This is the hidden resistance that shows up when you decide to return to yourself. The moment you say, I matter, the world around you shifts, and not always in ways that feel easy. Because many have grown accustomed to you putting yourself last. They've built entire dynamics around your silence, your yes, your availability. So when you start choosing yourself, it disrupts that system. It pulls the rug out from under what once kept others comfortable. You have to understand that you're healing your growth, your self-respect. It threatens the agreements that were made in your absence. The unspoken contracts that said you would carry the weight, that you would always bend, that you would never ask for more. And when you begin to break those contracts, people will react. Some with confusion, some with anger, some with guilt-laced words dressed up as concern. They'll say, you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer easy to control. It's important to see this clearly, not with bitterness, but with truth. Because if you don't, you'll keep going back. You'll keep shrinking every time someone flinches at your boundaries. You'll keep apologizing every time you choose peace over pleasing. And every time you do, you teach yourself that your needs are negotiable, that your well-being is a luxury, that your joy comes last. But those are lies, rooted in old patterns and conditioned roles that were never meant to define you. Choosing yourself is not abandonment, it is alignment. It is a return to integrity. It is the recognition that your life is yours to live, not perform. And it is not your job to carry the discomfort others feel when you stop making yourself small. Growth will always make noise. It will always cause tension. Because it's easier for people to deal with the version of you that doesn't require them to change. But you are not here to make life easy for everyone else at the expense of your soul. The discomfort of others is not your responsibility to manage. Their disappointment is not your burden to carry, and their opinions are not proof of your wrongdoing. You are not selfish for resting. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not selfish for choosing what is right for you, even when others don't agree. That is called self-respect. That is called maturity. That is called healing. And healing will cost you things. It will cost you roles, relationships, routines. It will cost you illusions. It will cost you the approval of those who only loved the version of you that stayed quiet and compliant. But what you gain in return is priceless. You gain yourself, your truth, your voice, your clarity, your peace. These are not small things. These are not selfish things. These are sacred. You are not alive to be consumed. You are not alive to be convenient. You are not alive to be understood by everyone. You are here to grow, to evolve, to rise. And sometimes that rising means disappointing people who refuse to meet you at the level you're called to. Let them misunderstand. Let them talk. Let them walk away. That is not your loss. Your loss would be abandoning yourself again just to be accepted by those who never truly saw you. Silence is a powerful teacher, and when you start focusing on yourself, you begin to hear things you couldn't hear before. You begin to notice the noise you used to call normal, the opinions, the expectations, the comparisons, the endless input from everyone else's world but your own. And when that noise starts to fade, even just a little, something sacred happens. You start to hear your own voice again, not the one shaped by fear or pressure, but the one that's been quietly waiting beneath it all. The one that knows, the one that remembers, the one that doesn't need applause to be true. Focusing on yourself means coming home to that voice. It means removing the layers that were never really yours. Layers built by trying to please, perform, and belong. It's about getting still enough to tell the difference between what's real and what's conditioning. Because you can't find clarity in a world that's constantly telling you who to be. You can't find your center when you're always orbiting someone else's idea of worth. The path back to yourself is not loud, it's quiet. And in that quiet, everything you've been seeking externally begins to rise from within. You start to notice what you need, not what you've been told you should want, but what actually fills you, grounds you, restores you. You begin to realize how much of your energy was spent maintaining identities that were draining your life force. And when you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. You start to reclaim your time, your space, your boundaries, not out of bitterness, but out of reverence. Reverence for your own existence. Reverence for your own capacity to heal, to create, to become. This kind of self-focus is not narcissism, it's liberation. It's the act of pulling your power back from all the places you left it. In the hands of other people's opinions, in the echo of old stories, in the rooms where you kept trying to be enough. And when you pull that power back, you begin to walk differently. You move with intention. You choose with clarity. You rest without guilt. You trust your instincts, not because they've been approved, but because you finally stopped abandoning them. And that shift is deeply unsettling to those who have only known you in your fragmented form. They will say you're distant, that you've changed, that you think you're better now. But what they're really feeling is their own discomfort in the presence of someone who is no longer easy to sway. Because the moment you start living in alignment with your truth, you become immune to manipulation. You stop explaining yourself to be understood. You stop proving your worth. You stop performing for connection. And that kind of energy is magnetic to those who are ready, but threatening to those who are not. Stillness teaches you to discern. It teaches you who feeds your soul and who feeds off of it. It shows you where you were settling, where you were shrinking, where you were seeking love in places that couldn't hold it. And it calls you higher, not through shame, but through remembrance. You remember who you were before you were told who to be. You remember what you loved before someone told you it wasn't practical. You remember the fire before it was doused by the need to be palatable. Focusing on yourself brings clarity, and clarity brings responsibility. Because once you know the truth, you can't pretend you don't. You can't unknow the feeling of peace that comes from living honestly. You can't unfeel the alignment of saying yes only when you mean it. You can't go back to noise once you've tasted the freedom of your own quiet. And in that freedom, you become sovereign again, not ruled by fear, not ruled by demand, but ruled by truth, grounded in love, guided by the sound of your own soul. When you choose to focus on yourself, you disrupt every lie that told you to be small. You silence the noise that said your worth must be earned through sacrifice, through silence, through suffering. You reclaim the power you once gave away in the name of love, duty, or acceptance. And though the world may resist your becoming, though it may call you selfish, rebellious, ungrateful, you will know better. You will know that choosing yourself is not a betrayal of others. It is the highest act of devotion to the life you were born to live. This journey will cost you comfort, approval, and the illusion of safety. But in return, it will give you clarity. It will give you wholeness. It will give you back to yourself. And that is the most powerful thing of all.